Welcome to DIYEasyCrafts.com. How to make a very unique Viking or Celtic style broad axe kitchen chopper. Now this chopper we made out of some scrap 1095 high carbon steel, 1/8 thick, and it was a fairly easy project. We used a angle grinder, cut-off wheels, flap sanding wheel, and a drill press. That's basically it. Also etched the salt water and a 12-volt battery charger, a Celtic design, and a dragon onto the blade. Anyway, I had some scrap steel in the shop. I cut out a basic template out of cardboard just to see if it kind of felt right in my hand. And then I'm just going to use an angle grinder with a cutoff wheel to start shaping this to the size. I basically traced the cardboard pattern onto the steel with a Sharpie. And a lot of these straight cuts or wide cuts are easily done with that cutoff wheel. Some of the inside curves are just a little bit more difficult. All you do really is you make a bunch of plunge cuts. That's what I'm doing here on the top of the blade. And then later I'll come in from the side and just cut off each one of those little knobs and end up with a very raggedy sawtooth cut shape, and then I'll smooth those down with a flap sanding wheel. And just make sure you wear eye protection whenever you're using a grinder, and just take your time. Try not to make any cuts or any grooves inside of those lines drawn with the Sharpie. And really, all I'm doing is I'm working my way around the blade, and I'm just removing as much steel as possible that's outside of the lines. I'm not trying to be perfect at this point. I'm not trying to run right along those lines. I'm just trying to get it close and remove as much material as possible. Now, here I'm going back and removing those little tabs created by the plunge cuts. And again, just continuing to work my way around the entire blade, chopping off as many of those little tabs as possible and removing as much material as possible and staying outside of the lines. Now, after I saw how this end result of this project came out, I did actually go out and have some blanks made on a water jet. So I will have the 1095 high carbon steel blanks, which is just the outline cut out. So if anybody does want to make any of these, I'll put a link on this video or under this video where you can find those axe blank links. What I've done now is I've moved to a flap sanding wheel. It's a very aggressive wheel. It's about a 40 grit, and it very quickly grinds down all of those really sharp sawtooth type raggedy lines left by the cutoff wheel. And I can also, with the same flap sanding wheel, really start to bring that shape or all of the curves right into the final shape. Bring it right up to that line. The inside curve, the deep one on the bottom of that broad axe was probably the most difficult. I did make a couple of plunge cuts, and then I ended up grinding with that flap sanding wheel from both sides, kind of coming at it from different angles. And once I did that, it wasn't too bad. You're certainly able to get in there. It just, took a little while. Now I finished up some of the inside curves just with a little Dremel grinder with a drum sanding wheel. It just allowed me to clean up some of the lines a little bit. And then I did sand the entire piece. I tried to get rid of any really sharp edges on the corners. I did notice one little gouge on the side, but fortunately I can hide that underneath the walnut handles when I mount the handles, so you won't end up seeing that gouge at all. Alright, so the next step is going to be to roughly sharpen or add the bevels onto the blade. I just did this with a belt sander. You could certainly do it with that same angle grinder and the flap sanding wheel. But if you have a belt sander, it's certainly easier on the belt sander. I'm also going to add or drill some 1/4-inch holes through the handle. I want to do this before I heat treat the blade. It's really, really difficult to drill holes after you heat treat. If you notice, I really secured it nicely in a drill press vise, and I even modified that vise so that it's got a swing arm gate that holds the blade into the vise so it can't lift out. You definitely don't want these blades spinning on you inside the vise, inside the drill press. The next step before heat treating is going to be to etch whatever design it is that you want onto the blade. Now I used a Cameo Silhouette craft vinyl cutting machine to cut out a Celtic design and also a dragon, and I made these self-adhesive vinyl stencils, I'll call them. I adhered those to the blade, and then I'm really just using salt water, a 12-volt battery charger set at 2 amps. I've got the positive lead of that charger hooked onto the blade, and I've got the negative lead I'm holding in my hand, and that's just clipped onto a wad of gauze that I dip into the salt water as the electrolyte solution. Then I go back and forth over every single area that I want etched. I did a really deep etch on this. I etched every spot for almost a minute, and then I turned off the battery charger, and then I can clean off and just make sure that it's deep enough. The principle here is that we're etching before heat treating so that the heat treating darkens that etch area a little bit, but we have to make sure that the etch is deep enough so that it stands up to the polishing or the sanding after heat treating. So anyway, I found a minute worked out pretty well. And I've done entire videos on this etching process. I can put a link right up on this video. A very easy process. And it really makes for some dynamic or dramatic results. Just peeling off the vinyl. Next step, I brought it over to my friend Jason Northgard's metal shop. he's kind enough to heat treat these blades for me. He's used his torches. He basically brings the blade to cherry red to the point where it's non-magnetic. And once it is at that state, he then quenches it in oil. That's the heat treating. After that, I take that blade and I stick it in an oven for 375 degrees for 3 hours, and then I let it cool slowly, usually overnight, without opening the oven door. And that's the tempering process. So the heat treating makes it really hard. The tempering makes it not so brittle. After heat treating, I just polish off all of that carbonization with a little 220, or I think it was a 320 grit. And then I added wood scales, walnut handles with brass pins. That's a very simple process, just 2-part epoxy. You epoxy the pins in place, let it dry, and then you can sand and shape the handle as desired. So overall, a pretty easy do-it-yourself process to make a very, very unique Viking or Celtic style kitchen chopper. Please check us out on the web at DIYEasyCrafts.com. Be sure to check out our other knife making and do-it-yourself videos. And if you like this video, I ask that you please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this YouTube channel.